all of their monetary tariffs and their non-monetary tariff trade barriers as well. We've heard from South Korea. We've heard from Japan. The president has spoken to Vietnam. We have Italy coming to the White House next week. There's a reason for that, Sean, and it's because they need the United States of America and our business model and our markets to survive, and the president is using that leverage to our advantage. Michael.
Hey, thank you, Caroline. Two-part question on China. Beijing says it will simply ignore any further tariff escalations from the U.S. Does President Trump see this as China backing down? And as a follow-up to that, what do you say to people like Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary who say, you guys simply haven't tariffed China enough?
Look, the tariff rate on China remains where it was yesterday, at the 145% level. The president made it very clear when the United States is punched, he will punch back harder, and he hopes to make a deal that benefits the American worker and our companies that have been ripped off for far too long, and he's finally taking bold and courageous action to do that. You know, taking on China is, in the terms of trade and tariffs, is something that both Democrats and Republicans alike have spoken about for decades. President Trump is finally doing it.
Caroline, real quick, the president of El Salvador is coming to the White House on Monday. Does President Trump want him to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia with him?
The Supreme Court made their ruling last night very clear that it's the administration's responsibility to facilitate the return, not to effectuate the return. I believe the Department of Justice just filed another brief in the lower court. I would defer you to that for any updates. But as you mentioned, President Bukele will be here at the White House on Monday to talk about the cooperation that is at an all-time high. And we very much appreciate President Bukele and El Salvador's cooperation and the repatriation of El Salvadorian gang members who the previous administration allowed to infiltrate our country. Sure.
Thank you very much, Caroline. The president spoke quite highly of the great relationship that he has with the Turkish president. We know that the president might be heading off to the Middle East very soon. Is he planning to meet with the Turkish president, either here in the White House or in Turkey? Any plans?
I don't have any details about the president's overseas trip other than to say he was surely going to Saudi Arabia. There could be more countries as part of that trip. We're working on the details, and as I've said repeatedly, we will provide the details of that trip as soon as possible.
A trip to Turkey, or his invitation to the Turkish president, is under consideration?
I'm not going to comment on the details of the trip, but once they're confirmed, I will certainly let you all know. Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to ask you about presidential health and also about tariffs. On presidential health, are there plans for the president's physician to come here and take our questions? And also, President Trump repeatedly makes remarks about the former president's health. Is he considering using his executive powers to bring any greater transparency there?
As I have said, the president is undergoing his long-scheduled physical. It's a yearly physical that every president receives, and we will provide an update on that by the president's physician as soon as we possibly can.
And about the former president and transparency regarding his health, are there...
Well, I can tell you there was certainly a lack of transparency from the former president, from the entire former administration, and frankly, a lot of people in this room when it came to the health and the competence of the former president of the United States, Joe Biden. There was one of the greatest cover-ups and frankly political scandals this nation has ever seen. It's been unraveled in some recent books that are being written by journalists who engaged in that cover-up and scandal, which is quite ironic. But this president is clearly committed to transparency. You in this room see him and hear from him on a daily basis. You in this room know from covering him, it's hard to keep up with him. He is a machine working around the clock every single day. And the physician, after today's physical, will provide an update on the report in the effort of transparency.
If I could ask about tariffs, there have been big swings this week in the Treasury bond yields. There's a theory that it might be because of China dumping these as leverage, driving up costs for U.S. loans like mortgages. Does the White House have evidence that this is in fact a result of Chinese dumping, and if so, is there a message on that?
Not to my knowledge, but I would check in with the Treasury Department on that. I can tell you I know our Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, is keeping a very close eye on the bond market. He spoke about it at the White House this week, and I know he's keeping his eyes on it day to day. Ed.
Thanks. Thank you, Caroline. So the administration, I have an administration source who's telling me that we're weeks away from the first deal with the country over tariffs. Where is the administration? How soon can we see that? And what